Tej, a team that we have to monitor, of course, is the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles go into that game against the Panthers, as I mentioned, 14-point favorites. Felt like, a little bit of a high line just based on what the Eagles have been doing recently. They've obviously, you win 8 games in a row going into this one, obviously 9 in a row after it. It's just hard to, I think, to maintain success overall in so many ways. I think we have to focus first on the Eagles passing game, where it is a combination of issues that kind of builds up to a larger problem where is at times a lack of design creativity. There are issues where it feels like Hurts is kind of using his dial of aggressiveness overall. He hasn't thrown an interception in a while. It feels like sometimes they're tight window throws that you could maybe take. You're going to throw some like tip balls in those sorts of situations, but it feels like maybe he's being pushed in a direction. Hey, we're not going to ever fault you for kind of throwing a check down. And then it's such a low volume pass offense that there's such a high emphasis on a few amount of plays. And then in a game where the Panthers did a really good job, I mean, I think you should do this probably, or I'm not sure if you agree, but when you're the underdog by this much, you shrink the game. Obviously, it's really, really hard to be able to do that, but I think they were able to do that. You get AJ Brown not targeted till the 2-minute warning in the second quarter. That's, of course, going to need to change. And I mentioned all of that. Keep on talking about Kevin O'Connell. You find ways to have your star receiver. Like, everyone knows that the ball wants to go to AJ Brown, but you have to be able to manufacture ways to your top receiver in some sort of way. And then there's the larger conversation of, is it the quarterback? Is it the coach? Is it the head coach? Is it someone else? It's not the offensive line. It's not the receivers to me. I'm pretty confident in those, although there are sometimes maybe you look at a receiver and it's like, hey, is this person just like kind of going all out on this route? Or do they feel like, hey, well, the ball's probably not going to come to me? I don't think that's not like an effort thing. That's just like how the pass game has sort of ended up, where it kind of pushes people in different directions. And it's crazy, I feel like, or not crazy at all. It's totally reasonable, I think, but like, it's wild to have to look at this 11-2 team that is on a 9-game win streak that is comfortably in the 2 seed. The 1 seed dreams were there. They're gone now. And just look at this glaring issue with literally like the most important part of a football team being the passing game. So just a lot to think about for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said there, where you look at this Eagles drop back game right now, and I think that they really miss Dallas Goddard. And you can see that the way that this roster is constructed, a lot of it was going to be around having these top 3 targets in AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goddard, and them having the majority of the target share, while the rest of the secondary receivers would fill in when needed. But when you have, a situation where you're missing one of those top 3 guys, you can really see the drop off from the starters to the second level. And that seems to be affecting them in the drop back game right now. And then on top of that, you mentioned like it's not the offensive line that's the problem. I don't think it's the main pass catchers like AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. Like I'm putting some blame on Jalen Hurts and his just comfortability in this offense, where when he was dropping back to pass against the Panthers, like he just didn't look that comfortable, when doing so. And you can especially see this in the first 2 drives of the game for the Eagles, where they ranked 32nd in EPA per play on the first 2 drives of games. They rank second only behind the Bills in EPA per play on third through the rest of the game drives. And so they have a negative 6% pass rate over expected in the first 2 drives, negative 8.3% pass rate over expected after that. And so it really seems like they have some sort of plan to pass a little bit more than they usually do beginning of the game. It doesn't go well, and they just lean on the run game, and they're able to have a very efficient rushing attack and are able to keep winning these games because of that. But they just need more out of the drop back game if they want to be very competitive against a lot of these teams like the Vikings and Lions in the playoffs.
I mean, the first 2 drives thing, that it almost feels like a bit at this point, Tage. Like, you're that devoted to being in the top left of the graph. You want to be in the top right. You don't have to be in the top left. It is so unfortunate, like when you're watching the game, because that's the first thing that's said on the broadcast, as it should be. Like, they just aren't scoring first drive touchdowns, and it's carrying over to that second drive too. So it's like you see some of these teams where they just have fantastic scripts, things are working so well, they're able to get the ball moving, and the Eagles are just not able to do that. So it feels like the passing offense is not asked to do a lot. They're not given a lot of answers, where it feels like you have stationary targets in a lot of ways. And this is a situation where there is a lot of volatility. I think, one, because of the low volume. So we're looking at like 5 snaps per game. And then there's situations where if Hurts is just like, if he gets off his first read just a little bit too quick, it's like, oh man, like there's a huge issue because that's like your one attempt to be able to do that. And then there's an example later on in the game where you get a slant, like a defender kind of jumps in the air on the broadcast. Like the broadcast is so unforgiving because like you're not seeing anything that's going on in the back end. So it literally looks like Hurts just gets the ball, has forever, is hanging out, and does nothing. You know, of course, there's certainly more to that, but you have like that high of a time to throw. I do think that the passing offense this year has been positive when they're kind of getting the ball out quickly. They're able to kind of keep things in rhythm. There's nothing wrong with being a high first read target team. Like there's just nothing wrong with that, especially in this season, Tage. I have seen like over the course of the games, like the ingredients for success. I've seen Hurts be able to read things. I've seen Hurts be able to make like high level throws over the middle of the field. I've seen them use under center play action. I've seen them use different concepts where AJ Brown is the featured target, where you're manufacturing kind of openness there. I just haven't seen it all in the same game. So I guess I have to kind of sit on it and think, all right, do I feel optimistic about it? How pessimistic do I feel about it? I think that part of me that like makes me want more is because I have seen those little factors all across the season, and you just want to be able to see it come together. Where at this point, I think they had 7 games so far this season where they had a higher EPA per rush than EPA per pass, which like I don't know. Should you just keep running the ball, Tage? Like the numbers are telling us that the rushing game is more efficient than the passing game. I feel like now the stats guys are just going to come at me for that.
No, because I actually like agree with you there where you know you don't you haven't seen the Eagles have a more efficient rushing attack than passing attack really since the Jaguars game. And like everyone's been able to pass on the Jaguars this year. So like ever since that game, like they've just been more efficient running the ball. And in this game in particular, they had a negative 10% pass rate over expected. And I'm not even sure that was low enough. Like it probably should have been lower than that based on how efficiently they were running the ball compared to passing the ball, where whether you looked on early downs or just in general, they had a higher EPA when rushing than passing. And so like if the Eagles would have ran the ball on every play in this game, I think they actually would have won by more points. You know, obviously you can't do that because of the lack of just like switching up the plays in between snaps. But like they should have just probably leaned on the run more because that is the best part of their offense right now, where their offensive line is so good. Like Jordan Mailata is such a good run blocker, and Saquon Barkley is obviously the best running back in the league this year at getting what's blocked for him and more. And so just the combination of that has been something that the Eagles should just continue to lean on down the stretch. But they really do need to figure out the drop back pass game if they want to compete in some of these higher end NFC matchups.
Tej, I wanted to ask you, the Eagles in this game, I think they just had like less drives than they usually do. So some of their per drive statistics ended up looking better, where you're able to score a bunch of touchdowns in just fewer drives. So I don't know. Do you feel like per drive statistics, obviously, yeah, I know you're king of, hey, all the stats need context, but are per drive statistics what you look at first? Are per play statistics what you look at first? Or is it just kind of game dependent for you?
Yeah, I mean, I do like per drive statistics a lot because, you know, sometimes I think per play statistics get watered down where, you know, you can have like a 12 play drive, you know, where you're just like slowly increasing your EPA. You maybe have some penalties in it to kind of bring it back, and it's kind of just going back and forth. But a per drive statistic like will usually tell the whole story, especially once you adjust for starting field position, time remaining, you know, things like that in the half. So I do like looking at per drive statistics from time to time. When I'm doing like certain splits, I'll usually try to look at EPA per play because it's harder to look at per drive statistics when you want to look at you know how teams are doing like run versus pass or off play action or when throwing screens. And so that's where I think the value of per play metrics really comes in.
I appreciate that. Tage finishing off with the Eagles here. You got kicking game issues now with Jake Elliott, where I think he's over 5 from 50 yards. Plus, as you mentioned, awesome running game. Saquon Barkley breaks the franchise record in this game, but we don't talk about that at all just because there are real passing game issues. It's just so interesting. Like, are you going to be able to survive playing this way? You've been able to this point. You've won really like games against good teams. You've beaten the Rams. You've beaten the Ravens. Obviously, this situation, as we mentioned, Carolina just able to shrink the game. I worry because it really feels like the most probable outcome is they're going to be locked into that 2 seed. I don't know how many of their games down the stretch are really even gonna matter for seeding. Obviously, you have to keep winning just to put pressure on Detroit, or even if it's Minnesota up there. So I worry about them sitting players, which I mean I'm a fan of. We'll talk about that I think in week 17, week 18. Just like you got to keep the guys healthy, but the passing game is not figured out. Like they literally need more reps. I don't know if you can afford to just like to not figure it all out before the first game of the